expanding in your seeing. Every day we become more as we hug the cosmic shore. Feel deeply inside, find yourself, help it arise. It's a calling from the divine. Burst forth from the heart spark, inside your body, inside the chest spaces where it resides. Come alive in the name of the I am. Come alive in the name that comes through in a gem. Oh, come alive in the self. Come alive with your mouth. Call to the truth, scream out its name. Let its wisdom tap into your veins. You are the carrier of our divine frequency. Let your spirit ray high as you look deeper at what you see. You are God, you must understand. I will never stop pointing in that direction with my dominant hand. Your music, hear the plan and learn to understand. Sit in the self for true revelations. You are meant for more than slavery and devastation. Feel deeply inside, by yourself, help it rise. It's a calling from the divine. Come alive in the name of the I am. Come alive in the name that comes through in a gem. Come alive in the self, come alive with your mouth. And your will, there is no time to chill, not on this timeline, not if you want this speed. We're all counting on you to call forth our divine needs. To all our means, arrive to the scene. Feel deeply inside, find yourself, help it rise. It's a calling from the divine. Come alive in the name of the I am. Come alive in the name of the I am. Come alive in the name that comes to in a gem. Come alive in the south. Come alive when you're now. Come alive you in the name of the I am. Come alive in the name that comes through in a gem. Come alive. You You're going to make this world like.
What is going on, everybody? How's it going? Thank you again for joining us for another Church of True Christ Sunday Ministry live sermon. We got a couple of really interesting things to break down today. We will be talking about leading by example, trusting the process, loving thy neighbor, and a few more things as well. We're going to be talking about spirituality and mental illness towards the end of the show as well. But if you would all like to join us for the direct Aramaic Lord's Prayer, we are going to go ahead and begin right now. So we have, O birther, Father, Mother of the cosmos, you create all that moves in light. Focus your light within us. Make it useful as the rays of a beacon show the way. Unite our I can to yours, so that we walk as kings and queens with every creature. Create in me divine cooperation from many selves, one voice, one action. Grant what we need each day in bread and insight. Forgive our hidden past and the secret shames, as we consistently forgive what others hide. Deceive neither by the outer nor the inner. Free us to walk your path with joy. From you is born all ruling will, the power and life to do, the song that beautifies all. From age to age, it renews. Amen. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Nice to see you today, Dyanna. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, hanging in there, hanging in there. I spent a lot of time outside yesterday in the sunlight, just kind of baking myself in it. It's nice, out here in Colorado. We have a very short spring until we get into summer, so we kind of go out and we enjoy the very short spring before it gets to be like 90 degrees at a mile above sea level. It gets pretty warm. How's your Mother's Day going so far?
Fish tragedy, but good. Other than that, my daughter made me breakfast and had presents and all that wrapped, so that was cute.
Oh, isn't that cool? And yes, a happy Mother's Day to everybody out there as well, all the moms that are going to be watching. We are grateful for you. And moms make the world go round. So they are the nurturers and they care for the future generations. So yes, let's give a whole bunch of love and respect to all the moms out there today. So these are actually like three of my favorite topics. This is something that, when we work on embodying true Christ and aligning our spiritual values to that of Christ as well. These are three things that more often than not start to kind of showcase themselves in our lives. And the number one thing is leading by example. And this is something that we all take on the responsibility of, as we start to embody these spiritual principles of Christ. And, ultimately, when we decide to embody the energy and teachings of Christ, we begin to emanate an understanding for a new way of being. We bring forth our values and spiritual alignment to integrate them with every aspect of our existence. Through doing this, we begin to shift our mindset, our behaviors, and actions towards ourselves, others, and our community. And we begin to lead by example, showing others that leading by example is the way we cultivate this new way of being by imparting contagious happiness. So that's something I want to talk about too. Dyanna, if you want to touch on it as well, it's that contagious happiness, and spreading that light, with everybody we come into contact with. That would be like the first thing of leading by example.
Yeah, for sure. Because if you're not going to do it, no one else is going to do it, because that's just how timelines work. You can't, the days of waiting for a savior are just not a thing anymore. You have to, they were never a thing. But we've gotten to a point of education and awareness where if you still think that's a thing, then you're kidding yourself. And I don't mean to be mean, because the truth is, it doesn't matter who shows up. If you're still stuck in victim mentality, that's where you'll stay stuck. Like, you won't, by your faith will you be healed. Like Jesus says this, you cannot stay in victim mentality and still be healed. The ones even that Jesus himself healed had the faith, had the knowing, had the trust. And he shows it birthed out of that. It's not birthed. The ones that were like, that didn't believe, that were against him, like he wished them well, but it was the ones that believed that he was able to provide extra layers of help for. And it's the same today. With that Christ consciousness energy, if you do not connect to it yourself, if you do not go within, then you do not access that Christ stream. It is available to us all. But just like the internet, if I didn't sign on today to make this show, then this show wouldn't happen. I had to do the work to sign on, and here we are. And thank you, StreamYard, and thank you, YouTube and Twitter and all the available platforms we have. They are here, but I had to access them. And Christ consciousness in a lot of these streams, I swear, I think the divine made computers and everything we have now to start giving us a conceptualized idea to how we actually work energetically, because it actually is very similar. You download, you upstream, and you connect to streams. And that Christ consciousness stream is a living embodiment that you can get within because of what it is. It's an entire layer of reality.
Absolutely. And, there's something I want to add to that. Like you said, you talked about the computers, you talked about the And I'm even going to go in there and throw in some aspects of the AI as well. I think one of the biggest things we do in our conscious collective, in our spiritual community, is we start to look at everything that is man-made as bad, but we also have to understand that the divine works through us. The divine hand works through us in our creations as well. And even sometimes for those creations we might not think are the best for us in some ways, there was some kind of divine hand in that. And of course, we look at a lot of these creations as tools. The internet is a tool. All of these things are tools. A tool can be used to create amazing things, and or a tool can be used to destroy. But at the same time, like Dyanna is saying, yes, we're kind of getting a symbolic representation of what we do spiritually here, as far as downloading, upstreaming, phase locking, all of those other things as well. We kind of start to see that physical symbolism in it through our computers, through the internet, and all of those things as well. And leading by example, kind of tying on to what Dyanna was saying. Yes, it's leaving the victim mentality and presenting that contagious happiness with those that we come across is ultimately what we're trying to do when we're trying to spread the values and the alignment of true Christ. Because we look at what true Christ is, we look at it as love, complete and total acceptance. We look at it as understanding. So that's something we have to do with our interactions with the people that we face in the world, even if we think they're asleep, if we think they're normies and they're NPCs. A lot of people in our community, they get kind of negative towards people who aren't exactly awake yet. But a lot of us have to remember, and we have to understand too, that some of us were there beforehand. We were there also, in a sleep mode, deep in the forgetting, and through whatever instances we had in our life, whether it be we were pushed into complete darkness, we were revealed something at a certain point of our life. And that's ultimately what caused us to cultivate that divine spark within us. So, leading by example would be that contagious happiness. It would also be having that unconditional love. And I know this is something I want to talk about because, we talk about in our spiritual evolution, and we talk about how Christ, that energy, that fabric of reality, is unconditional love. It's love in its purest form. And I think that's something, Dyanna, a lot of people struggle with. Is cultivating that unconditional love, not just for themselves, but for other people as well. And, we're going to be diving into loving thy neighbor a little later in the episode, but let's talk about the unconditional love for a second, Dyanna. Let's kind of talk about how we can start to cultivate that within ourselves and gain that understanding of how we can have this unconditional love, not just for ourselves, but for others as well. I find this to be one of the biggest obstacles a lot of us face. Your mic. No.
Yeah. And that's why I'm so passionate about teaching people the art of allowing, because I remember being in my early awakening and being very bitter and being like, I don't want to forgive them. I don't want to forgive that. I don't want to, you know what I mean? But when you switch the terminology, you switch the frequency you're locking in on. And I think the better word is allowing, because I was here I took entire courses on forgiveness. I knew it was so powerful for us to embody and to get into. I knew forgiveness is a core element that we do need to achieve, but simply saying forgiveness. And they would say, oh, you can forgive them, but you don't have to forget. You can forgive them, but blah, blah, blah. And it's still it wouldn't sit. It wasn't until this old cult I was in, she said allowing. So it's not my original idea, but she just casually threw it out there. She's just like, yes, you just have to allow it. And then went on and on and on. And then it just it was a humongous epiphany. And I was like, that's just it. It's allowing. And that was eons ago. And it's since then just grown and grown to be the actual truth of what we have to do with so much of our integration and ascension process is allowing the sleepers to have their time, allowing what happened in our past to happen, allow what's happening in our present to just be. If you can change it by all means. But if you can't at all, You need to find the space of allowing, because it really is like a tangible stream, and it does something. It allows you to let go of things of the past. It allows you to be in the now of what's happening in the present, and it allows you to be in command of your future, because you can try to set things up as best as you want, but rather than panic or worry about if it's going to be perfect, you need to just allow. So I'm going to try my best, but I'm going to allow what's to come to come. And it does something, because humanity can get very stuck. We can get blocks very easily. It's part of
Absolutely.
just how our energetic structure works. It's why stretching and things like that are so important, because you're allowing the physical body to release things. But likewise, for our energy and for our mind, allowing will set you so completely free.
Absolutely. And Sam just brought up a really good comment too. I was going to say the allowing to me is very much like the principle of non-attachment. That's actually, Sam, good on you for bringing that up. But it's kind of relinquishing that attachment to the way others not only perceive themselves, the way others choose to carry on with themselves, whether they're asleep, whether they don't know what they do. And we talk about, when Christ was being crucified, and he said, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." And I think that's a mentality we need to take, as well. When we're finding that unconditional love and that acceptance for others, whether they might not be on the same path as us, whether they might not be spiritually awakened like we are, and really it comes down to to me, it's a little bit of chosen ignorance, but it's also a little bit of blissful ignorance at the same time. We see a lot of people. We look at a lot of people, and they walk around in autopilot. Man, I see it every day. I deal with people who walk around in autopilot every day. They're not aware, and they might not have that moment for them yet, that burning bush moment, as I call it as well, that has really kind of, ignited that divine spark within them. And, humanity does have a habit of getting stuck, it has a habit of also too focusing on the wrong things. Sometimes, the things that the most pettiest of things, the things that don't matter in the grand scheme of things. So yes, it's about that allowing, it's about that non-attachment. That's a really great way to put it, Dyanna. And allowing and even understand and finding a little bit of yourself in that person too, because like I was saying, we, a lot of us, we're there at a time ourselves. Even though a lot of us were born this way, at least I'm convinced, we had to still come into that realization. We had to still come into that remembrance within us, so it's about that allowing and non-attachment. Awesome. And another way, one of the best ways that I want to talk about leading by example is the courage through each of our interactions, not just with our experience, but when we touch the experience of others. Now, for me, what I say, courage for me right now, the best way I could describe courage is living truly in your authenticity, and letting that light shine. Right now in our world, loving ourselves and loving others is one of the most rebellious acts there is. We're conditioned to have this subconscious shame complex within us. You've heard the term in society. It's like, do you have no shame? When that's relayed to us, when we live in our authenticity, we get this response. It's like we catch this flack, from a lot of the people around us. So what I mean by saying we should have courage when we lead by example, we have to have the courage to live in our authenticity and shine our divine light, because as we know, when we shine that light in everything that we do, every single intention, every single action, every single thought, every single interaction we might have with another person around us, to shine that light is the most courageous thing we can be doing right now. What are your thoughts about that, Dyanna?
Yeah, 100%. And that's like what we're both like living to do. And that's just constantly get that through to people, and how to empower them, because you want self-love, but you also want honest self-love. You want to So this means looking at everything in your life. And this is why, again, astrology, human design, gene keys, even, because you can start to map out what was I born with. And that doesn't mean that you need not try to curve it or anything. If you find it there, like if it says you're a serial killer, that doesn't mean, oh, I guess I got to be a serial killer. No, it means like you're going to look at it all and you're going to, the stuff that's bad, you can like learn to allow that and to circumvent that somehow. But then there's other things that if it's not mentioned at all, like if you're a generator and you're not like doing what you need to do enough physically, like you have the energy. So maybe start asking what's wrong with my energy, what is holding me down, because we want self-love, but from a place of authenticity. Because when you get into spirituality, there's a lot of narratives out there that will, and maybe they don't mean to do it, but they will push you into false positivity. We're like, I just got to love all of me no matter what. And it's like, yes, you do, always with the love. And this is where unconditional love comes from. And this inserts allowing as well, because that's how it is unconditional, is you are allowing all of it and still loving it. So no matter what the quirk is, you could still love it. But if it's not from an authentic place, a truthful place, you'll still just be stifling yourself. So you want to dig out.
Absolutely. No, I 100% agree with you. You froze up for a second, Dyanna, but yeah, the false positivity, and that's where even the self-honesty comes into play. And I know you and I, on all of our shows we've talked about. Go ahead. You're back. Did you want to continue off of that?
I was just going to say, as we know with manifestation, you do want to always be aiming in that direction. And again, why we love Christ and why we're here bringing Christ, because when you pull Christ into all of this, so bringing out the authentic self and correcting out the issues that you want to work on, like all the different habits and patterns, it's different for all of us. Like maybe you have a bad attitude with the waitress. Maybe you don't clean. Maybe you need to eat better. Maybe you need to work out, because everybody should work out. This isn't a gym person thing. The body needs that, especially in modern life. I mean, if you have a physical job, that might do it, but most of us don't anymore. So that's something that you need to work on. There's so many things. And then when you keep Christ in all of it, you're going to keep that golden light on all of it, which is a frequency, which is going to cause it to aim up, aim up, aim up. It's going to automatically aim it up, because when it comes to manifesting our life, which is our real point of being here, they're trying to make flesh beings be like gods so that they can just get a new layer of existing in a way that feels real, but also magic. So getting ourselves to a place of manifestation and manifesting and being in control of our world, but in a positive God light, that's the point. So authentic self-love is so key, and always working on that self through a place of love to birth the new human in you.
Absolutely, and that authentic self-love is courageous. It is. I mean, it's in all reality, like, I don't know, I guess the best way I could say it is, it shouldn't be. We all should have that self-love for each other, and ourselves as well. But due to the conditioning of our society and the fact that true Christ has really been on the outskirts of our frequency up until now, we right now, it's a courageous act to have that self-honesty, that self-love, that allowance within ourselves. It's going to be, you're going to be shining your light as of right now in the darkness. And even though that is changing, like we've talked about in a couple of our other episodes leading up to this, the true Christ is starting to crack its way into the darkness of this existence. Like that first little bit of light that after this long period of darkness. So you yourselves, everybody out there who is working with true Christ and aligning themselves to true Christ, it's our responsibility to lead by example and to shine this light into the world even more, and we have to start amping that up. And that's one of the reasons why I think, it's one of the biggest, when we go on our spiritual evolution, we take on responsibility and we take on accountability, for ourselves, our actions, the way that we are with other people. And one of the biggest things you can do to showcase that responsibility is to lead by example and shine that light of true Christ in, from within you into your perceived physical experience, and to sit there and to shine that light into every person that you come across. Now, you're going to come to find that maybe not a lot of people are 100% ready for that, but that you did your due diligence by planting that seed into them, and the biggest thing I can say as well is, leading by example too is doing the right thing even when nobody is watching as well. That's another thing as well. Some of us sometimes, I mean, and I myself have been guilty of this in the past as well. Would even when nobody was watching, I would try to fudge something, or you would try to maybe half-ass something or not do it right. No, leading by example is always leading by example, even when you're by yourself, even when you're with yourself. And that's one of the biggest things that we have to hold in our awareness when it comes to this, man. And if you don't mind, Dyanna, I know we have some of the verses of leading by example. Do you want to dive into those for a little bit and read a couple of those?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on there because leading by example when you're alone, you're never alone. There's more beings that we can't see that can see you. So you're affecting the frequency and the matrix, and so many things are getting shot out whether or not anyone's there.
Absolutely. I would 100% agree. And we have I have one of these quotes here I wanted to bring up. You have John chapter 13 verse 14 through 15. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have set you an example that you also should do as I have done to you. And then we have Matthew chapter 5, verse 14 through 16. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under the bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, just as we were talking about. This is really cool how that syncs up, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. A disciple is not above the teacher, but everyone who is fully qualified will be like the teacher. So I really enjoyed those because, it's everything we just talked about, it really is. And ultimately, I think, we can't be afraid to lead by example in this world. We can't be afraid to shine the light of true Christ into this experience, and a lot of you out there, who have been on your spiritual evolutions. You've caught some flack. You've had, people smith out on you. We've talked about that. I've talked about the Smith effect before many times. And, if you guys want, we can go into it just a little bit here, but, the Smith effect is when you start to improve your life spiritually and not just spiritually, but on every level, mentally, physically. You start taking care of yourself. You start educating yourself about, these spiritual principles. You start educating yourself on metaphysics and how the world works, and you ultimately start to put that foot forward in your life. And you start to embark on your spiritual evolution. You seem to catch flack from everybody around you. People get upset that they see you improving, that they see you progressing. And this is what we call the Smith effect. Of course, it's taken from Agent Smith of the Matrix. But, you're going to get that regardless, guys. When you start doing this, you're holding a mirror up to the world around you, everybody else. When you start to improve yourself, you're holding this mirror. And of course, when you hold a mirror up to somebody who isn't exactly ready to look into said mirror, they are not going to like it, but that should not deter you from still leading by example, living in your highest authenticity, and shining the light of true Christ into this world.
100%. And it's important for people to note the Agent Smith effect is a lovely name and I really vibe with it and I use it now myself. But it's not just one thing. It'll be that person's entities. It'll be egregores, or it'll really actually will be some kind of Agent Smith thing, because everything we say and do is seen at a higher level. And I mean, higher is not always like, there's things that can get into us that are, I don't want to fear, but they, not us so much. And this is why you want to protect your aura, but definitely them, definitely the sleepers. Things can just come into them and take them over. So it doesn't even have to be a permanent entity. It could just come and go. It could be a constant stream that's there policing things. That's why I think the Agent Smith, when it's in its truest form, I don't mean higher as in like good high. I mean higher as in it's above us, permeating in to this reality and just looking for divergence to shut it down. So what I found is the best way with these kinds of people, and regardless of entity, egregore, or like an overlay of an actual Agent Smith thing, is ask them why they said it. Ask them why. And they're going to argue with you and not even want to say it. So don't bother arguing with what they said. Don't never try to overprove your point. Say what you said, drop the mic. That's it. If they want to discuss it, fine. But if they say some kind of nasty Agent Smith thing, rather than argue back, ask them why they said it. Now, they'll give you resistance on answering you, and they'll probably call you holier than thou and blah, blah, blah. I've had it all. So still press very, very, very politely, very lovingly. Anytime you're arguing with a sleeper, you want to stay in your higher God self, because that's going to leave that imprint on them after. Because if they had it, it could still stick in their mind and be like, wow, they really were like loving and light, and it'll plant seeds. But besides that, keep asking them why. Firm though, keep asking them why. You will trace it back, and more often than not, you might get a BS answer that doesn't stand up, and you can keep tracing that back, and or you'll get eventually, I don't know why I said it, because I've had that many times too, where because they've gotten used to me tracing it back, and they're just more quick to say, I don't know why I said it. And that's exactly it. You just got by an entity, and try to get them to see that.
Absolutely. And I like how you said that. Why'd you say it? And like you were saying too, what the Agent Smith is, I've even theorized that it could potentially be Yaldabaoth, or potentially a concept or an aspect of Yaldabaoth's consciousness. Because, when we look at Yaldabaoth, at least in my eyes, he would be considered the true Satan here. When it comes to the matrix reality that we're currently living in, he is the one who made it come into fruition. But it's very possible it could be a consciousness stream of Yaldabaoth, because we look at Yaldabaoth and the concept of that energy and that entity. And he wants to keep us here. He wants to keep us, coming back here. He wants us to continuously reincarnate here. So when this consciousness stream of energy sees people achieving gnosis and cultivating that divine spark within them, which is ultimately going to lead to them leaving here, that's another thing, a way we could look at the Smith effect, and potentially what it is. But nonetheless, guys, don't let it stifle you. When you go, and this is even going into our next topic, trusting the process as well. This is going to be part of the process that you experience. And that's why I'm actually really happy we're touching on trusting the process today. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to dive into that as well, because this is something that we a lot of us on our spiritual evolution can get frustrated about. We can have a hard time trusting the process, because sometimes trusting the process is understanding that there's going to be a demolition of your old world around you. Okay. And that's why, more often than not, when we embark in our spiritual evolution and acceptance of Christ, we come to find our worlds can dramatically change and shift in the process. Change can sometimes be very uncomfortable. You know what I mean? Of course, even when we find comfort in that dysfunction, that has been around us for so long. And we root ourselves in comfort. A lot of us have rooted ourselves in the comfort of dysfunction due to the conditioning we've experienced throughout our lives, our upbringings. A lot of us were raised with toxicity in our families and our close inner circles as well. When we begin to open ourselves to Christ and the greater divine aspects of our reality, we ultimately start shifting our being towards a more positive vibration and frequency. And what this can mean to us is our embodiment of Christ can start to demolition our current experience and what no longer serves us spiritually. If we have grown roots in comfort or dysfunction, this can sometimes be an alarming process. When our world starts to shift, what we must hold in our awareness is these changes occurring are helping pave the way and build a new foundation for joy and abundance with Christ. Christ ultimately wants us to live a life of love, happiness, joy, elation, of the purest and truest form. This is where we also have to have a moment of self-honesty. Was the life I was living before of true happiness, love, joy, and abundance? That's something we have to ask ourselves as we go through these changes and we begin to trust the process. Was I treating myself and others the way that I truly should be? That's another question we have to ask ourselves as well. Was I doing the right thing by myself and others? These are the questions that we must be completely honest with ourselves about so we can truly break away from what no longer serves those principles of our highest purpose. So Dyanna, trusting the process. This is something that we've come to learn, and the process can sometimes be very jarring. It can be very abrasive. So let's hear your thoughts on trusting the process here and how important it is to leave ourselves open to the changes that will occur once we start living in alignment with true Christ.
Yeah, 100%. And you have to do it. So I'm going to start with a Bible quote. And I know I can, it sounds like I besmirch the Bible a lot, but that's just because I want you to learn to be discerning with it. But it does have tons of good in it as well. And this quote's one of them. Galatians 6:5, for each will have to bear his own load. That's it. That's clear. That's obvious.
That's
That's
very obvious.
self-sovereignty. And then sprinkle in some discernment and you're set, because that's just it. And when it comes to coming against those forces like you spoke of, the ego is really what that comes down to. And yes, there can be programs, but your ego yourself is a gatekeeper. Your ego itself is going to, when you're early, if you've been doing this for a while, you're going to get cleared out. And your ego is going to become more like the servant to God. God being you, the higher self, and the ego being the servant that helps you deal with just regular life. So you need to be a spiritual warrior and stand up to your ego. You need to be the one to come. This is where you die to the self, because you basically go to spiritual war with yourself. That fight of heaven and hell we've all imagined is your higher self and the ego going at it. And the higher self will win. All you need to do is get your will on board. And your will is like a separate entity. And your will is the one that should be the one driving. And when you do that, you'll find truer parts of your personality. You'll bring back lost soul shards. You'll become a more whole and complete person by finally stepping forth with that will. But because it's probably atrophied and hasn't been used since you were a child, but you got scolded out of it, school scolded it out of you, it's been bred out of you, you're just left with a quieted higher self and the ego running the entire show. But bringing that third part, that will, online, and you can link that with the middle pillar and the Christ consciousness, because your will is good, but it can get shut off. So you want to pull that back online. And that means going to war with the self. That means riding the bull of the ego until it calms down and submits, because it will. The only thing you want to submit in this world is that ego.
Absolutely, absolutely. And really what this comes into, I mean, this even ties into what we were just talking about when it comes to leading by example. And, the unconditional love, we have the allowing and the non-attachment that's going to come into this play as well. It is. And you explained it perfectly on how the ego is a servant to the higher self. The ego is what helps us, navigate this reality, as a individualized, perceived separation of the divine, which we know that we are all one ultimately. And but yes, no, the goal is to tame that ego. It's to put it in the passenger seat of your existence while letting the higher self drive. And, ultimately, we're going to, as we begin to embark on our spiritual evolution, we allow true Christ within us. And, this demolition phase might occur. This is a imperative time, at least in my eyes, to start learning how to tame that ego and, how to soften it, because it's going to try to rip and hold on to any facet of the old world that you might have experienced, and we talked about finding comfort in that dysfunction. A lot of us were very comfortable in dysfunction and toxicity before we embarked on our spiritual evolution. And of course, what happened when we embarked on our spiritual evolution? We lost friends, we lost, we might have lost homes, we might have lost family members who stopped talking to us. We might have felt this profound sense of loss, in the very beginning of all of this, of course, and this is where we have to have that self-honesty with ourselves, as Dyanna was talking about in just a little bit ago, and ask ourselves those questions. Was the life I was living before of true happiness, love, joy, and abundance? And one of the biggest things we do in our life, especially on our spiritual evolution, is we can be our own biggest cheerleaders, and we can be our own biggest critics, right? And it's about having and maintaining that balance between being our cheerleaders and being our biggest critics. That ultimately is what makes or breaks this for us, and it's not an easy task to do that, because some days we got to give ourselves grace. We might be having like a not so great day, didn't sleep too well, the energies are all kind of funky, and those days, we have to give ourselves grace and kind of be our biggest cheerleaders. And this would actually be a good a balancing exercise for a lot of you to find that balance, is on those really good days where you're feeling the love, or you're feeling the flow, or you're feeling the fire, and everything's awesome that day. That day, maybe you want to start getting a little bit more critical of yourselves, like, because you could be being blinded by the energies. You could be, in a state of bliss, because you woke up and the energies are great, and you're all embodied into it, and you're feeling amazing. And those days you might want to start implementing the critical part of yourself. Be like, okay, like, not into a negative context, of course, but just be like, okay, like, what could I refine within myself today? I'm feeling great. I'm in a positive mindset. I can approach, like, what can I refine about myself today with a more positive mindset, as opposed to a more negative mindset. And then those days where we don't feel really great, we wake up, we might have not slept well, the energies might be a little bit funky, a little bit wonky, we might not feel all there. Those are the days that you should kind of give yourself that grace and be a little bit of your biggest cheerleader in that fashion, because then you're helping reciprocate the balance of it all. And ultimately, this even falls into trusting this process as well, because each day is going to be different for us. Things can surface one day. We could wake up and have a lot of this the darkness that we potentially carry in ourselves start to surface. Whatever's going on energetically with us or in our collective can cause that to happen. And that's one thing too, I want to bring up about trusting the process as well. And I know Dyanna is like a pro in this, so I'm going to hand it over to her in her sec, is not to be afraid of that darkness that could potentially rise within us as well, because we talk about true Christ and being in alignment with our spiritual values. We look at a lot of love, we look at a lot of light, and some days we can be greeted by this darkness within us that can start to surface, but we can't be afraid of that. We need to learn how to understand and integrate it. And I'm going to turn this over to Dyanna now, because she, like me, we can learn how to use darkness for energy as well, and we can transmute that darkness for energy. So Dyanna, why don't you give your thoughts on that as well? What when we start to see that darkness rise within us, or we see a little bit of darkness from whatever could have happened to us in our lives start to showcase itself, what in your eyes would be a good way to address this and to utilize it and to integrate it in a proper way?
Well, it would all come down to what the darkness is first. And then it comes down to getting familiar. And you'll use allowing again. You're going to use allowing a lot. And you sit with it and you allow. And then you learn to cultivate the 0 point energy zone, the complete void of darkness. Like I see mine as like an internal cave, and the bottom floor is like this shimmering black, like water, but thinner. And it just is. And that's real. And that might be a black hole. But this 0 point energy zone, this void space is real. So when we talk about darkness and how it can make art, that's where all creation comes out of the darkness. It holds the potentiality for absolute all of existence. It only goes into, and it is it's everything. So you could even say it's the light, but once it becomes the light, it's like transmuted to a different state, like how all the elements can change states and now they're called something else. But when we're talking about evil, it is closer to that pool of darkness, but that pool, the void space, is completely neutral. It's all potentiality, and it's a place you can meditate into and you'll actually feel it come alive. And in that space, there is energy to be found. There is creativity to be found. Often in meditation, when we still the mind to absolute silence, you're going to that space. That is usually that space. There's lots of spaces you could go, but quite often the complete stillness is that 0 point energy zone, that darkness void. So in that space is where we can deal with our evils. If we think we have evils, you never want to shame and blame, but you do want to be educated on the self. So it depends what it is, and you have to sit with it. You have to be willing to not sin anymore. There was one here about sin. I don't see it now. Oh, well. Because as to sin is to death. Sin leads to death was the gist of the quote. You don't want to sin. Sin leads to death. Now, they said that over and over and over again in the Bible. And then out of it, the Christian religion birthed a ton of dogma. But the reason you don't want to sin is because it takes standard darkness that we're made of, because we are darkness beings. So the human being born in sin, and no, none of that's true. We're born out of darkness. That's true, because that's how creation happens. That's how this dualistic world split. The darkness physically made us, and then the light shines down our soul. But at the end of the day, it's all darkness. Darkness was the first. This is why they say the female was the first. Darkness was first, but it was more like Aphroditic at this point, if that's a word. And then out come the woman, then out came the man, then out come another woman, and then so on and so forth, whatever you want to believe. But what we can all kind of sense into is that original realm with.
Absolutely, Dyanna, you froze up, but no, and actually, one of the things I want to bring up as well is, the darkness that we're going to get a little bit philosophical here for a second as well. That there you go, you're back. Do you want to finish that up?
I don't know where it cut out, but yeah, darkness is the original energy. So when we're dealing with fixing our sinning and fixing our evils, that's where you want to kind of allow it without shame, because you're still going to have darkness. So let's say you have suicidal thoughts. That doesn't have to be evil. Let that be poetic. Write a song, write a poem, There's art. Art is the ultimate way. There's probably other ways, but art is the best way I found in all the modalities of art, and whatever skill level you have, in whatever tickles your fancy. Art is where you're going to transmute evil urges into just beauty and art, because the darkness, the shadow, and I don't even just mean like our subconscious shadow, like the shadow aspect of the earth, it's all made to be used. It's made to be used. So sin and evil are coming out of unused and untapped darkness energy. And that energy it doesn't want to be stifled either. So like the toxic positivity or the rigid dogma of the Christians will create a block for the darkness, and it will start to get janky and calcify and shoot off in the wrong directions. And shooting off in the wrong directions is where evil comes from. If you have uncontrollable evil sinning urges, clear for entities, but if it's truly you, then you need to deal with darkness, and that means art. Art. I can't think of a better suggestion than art, unless, all the things I could think of fall under the purview of art, and that's dancing, literal art. Writing is my big thing. Drawing, singing, writing plays, making movies, architecture. Like, so many things in this world are art that you could throw yourself into.
Absolutely. And, I want to bring up something I heard the other day, because you talked about urges. So, especially when it comes to darkness. Now, the one thing I want to preface this with is a lot of us, before we got on our spiritual evolution, we accepted true Christ within us. A lot of us are coming from darkness. I mean, I myself have conquered addiction. I even though I've been clean, I'm still a recovering addict. A lot of us have had trauma, and a lot of us have developed these darkness urges from these trauma responses. So I actually heard a really cool term I want to bring up. It is called surfing the urges. And so I don't know if you've heard this before, Dyanna, but I was actually watching this video the other day. It was talking about, conquering dopamine addiction is actually where they brought up this term. But what surfing the urges are, so when we resist something in our lives, of course, we've all heard the term, if you resist it, it persists. Right. And then also, too, something that happens when we resist this, and of course, talking about the new age, that they refuse to acknowledge any kind of darkness or anything along those lines. Just don't focus on it, of course. And, I've told my story a few times before. When I first embarked on my spiritual evolution, I got looped into the new age thing, and I resisted my darkness. I discounted these dark things within me. And then what happened to me is they started to persist, and number one, but there was something called a rebound effect that occurred as well. So now, because I wasn't acknowledging this aspect of myself, it was starting to manifest itself into my life in the nastiest of possible ways. So we want to avoid that. So what surfing the urges is it's acknowledging them and sitting with them and allowing them to pass. And the guy in the video was, very cool about it. It was very interesting. He was talking about how, like, when I had the urge to jack up my dopamine through whatever means it would be, whether it would be getting online, whether it would be, looking at corn, whether it would be doing drugs or drinking or anything along those lines, and the urge would come up. Instead of resisting it, I'd be, okay, here's that urge again. Here it is. It's back. I want to increase my dopamine right now, but we know that I'm trying to improve myself urge. Okay. Like, even like sit there and like talk to it, like almost as if it's like an energy or an entity in and of itself. And which, we look at these energies that spawn within us, and they very well could have an entity source to them, or, that's something we have to keep ourselves open to as well. Of course, we have entities interacting with our consciousness stream pretty much frequently at this point. But you have to surf that urge. It's about, again, we talk about allowing. It seems to be the biggest trend in this episode, which I'm really liking. But it's not allowing yourself to do the urge. It's allowing yourself to feel the emotion and the energy from that urge, and sitting with it and allowing it to pass. Because if you do that, then you're going to notice it's not going to persist, and it's not going to I guess you could say, start to manifest itself into your life with a rebound effect in these horrible, nasty ways. And even like Dyanna was saying, art, you know, when you feel this coming up, you know, in yourself. And of course, we're all going to have dark thoughts happen. We're going to have aspects of us that we have not healed surface and start to showcase themselves potentially in our energy that day, or, you know, potentially showcase themselves in our actions, our behaviors, all of that. And you know, of course, we're on the spiritual evolution. We want to sway in the balance of the light, and we see this, and it can be alarming to us. It can be shocking to us, you know. But know that if you surf that darkness, and you acknowledge it, and you allow yourself to feel it and release it, this is ultimately what's going to help you overcome and not only heal those aspects of yourself, but again, you will learn to utilize the energy from that for your creative processes. Like Dyanna was saying, with art, for me, it's guitar, you know, in my show. You know, Dyanna does music herself as well. You can see the cat painting in the background over there as well also. So yes, I think that's a very good point, Dyanna.
Yes. To be fair, my sister made that one. I made that one.
Okay, cool. Awesome. No, totally.
But yes, no, I love art, and I love getting it out. And because what it is, like, and you could say it's not just our fault. There's probably frequencies being put into us, but that darkness urge is the urge to create, because we're creator beings, and that 0 point energy zone, the void space, is where creation pops out of. The Akashic Records is a darkness space. The Akashic Records is the same as the void, or part of it, probably like a higher layer on it, if I had to use my own gnosis. But it's about, I wrote a note here, I can't find. It's about, yeah, just using that darkness for something better. And I remember, is when it comes to urges. So I didn't have it in me to be such a warrior, and to just, when it came to my ego, I could calm it down, but it still needed something. So like when I quit drinking, I switched to Haagen-Dazs ice cream, pralines and cream, filled with sugar and fat, and it would do it. And I ate that every night for a year or two. And but then that was too much, and I was gaining weight. And so I switched that for Snickers and chips. And then that lasted for a while, and then it became so, like, it wasn't every night. And there's something about the night too. I don't know if that's just me, but I could be perfectly fine all day, but then the sun goes down, and then that craving, maybe because the sun's gone, but that craving for dopamine starts to hit, and it calls for something to feed it. So through the years, I switched to smaller and smaller things, and I spent my time in my toxic positivity, where I did basically starve myself, and I was going into those zones where I can deprive myself and not do it. But I found like it didn't have balance in that zone for me. Like in that zone, it would have backlashes, like you were saying, because I was like betraying myself, because there was like that part of me, that ego self, that subconscious self. There's so much of the self, the body itself, that's used to this. Like, you have to take care and honor your body. So, and it's personal to everybody. If you can just quit, just quit. But if you can't, you can work with yourself like you're the life coach and it's the client. And little by little, switch alcohol for ice cream, switch ice cream for chips, switch chips for dark chocolate. Like I don't really do anything now. I can't think of anything. I have weekdays, like not during the weekday. I mean like week, WEA. Okay.
I know
There's
what you mean.
days where I'm weak on that, and then I'll go, but not even like I used to. If I was to eat chips now, they make me sick. I haven't even touched a Snickers in forever, because the last time I did, it made me sick. So like, because your body starts to upgrade and to get to newer levels where it's going to expect better care. So once upon a time, it was boo-hooing about not getting horrible stuff. Now it boo-hoos if it gets anything bad, and just a little bit. So like, you switch and you switch and you switch, and what your treats are switch. Like now, like a kombucha is a treat, and olden day me would have been like, oh yeah, poser. No, for real, like a kombucha is a treat. Like that's how you get, and like you just upgrade little by little. It took me years. So if you want to do badass mode and bang it out in a couple weeks, if you can do that authentically, I 100% say go for it. But the truth is that we need to be okay with letting this process with our minds and our bodies and the connection with our soul to take the time it needs to. We have our whole lives. We have lots and lots of time. There's no need for this process to be done in a year. Because trust me, I was obsessed with finishing. I thought there was going to be somehow some finish line of ascension back in my days when believing that the ascension was just going to be, because that's what my cult taught me, of being taken in a bubble and just poofing through. And I just, no, unfortunately not. I wish. And maybe that'll happen to the people that can really believe it, but I don't think I can get to that place of truly believing that. So it's best that I work in the reality that I do believe and work in the ways that I do know, because that's how you do it. Like, you'd be like, okay, I can't get myself to do this, but I can get myself to do that. And that's a little better than what I was doing. So step there. Okay. And then once you're comfortable and ready to jump again, you do the same thing. Okay, I'm ready to get better than the chips. I'm going to, even if it's a drug thing and you switch like one of your drugs for cannabis or psilocybin or like any of the psychedelics, that's a great way to go about it. Like if you can't get off any, like the drugs or even alcohol, you switch. Like when I quit alcohol, I actually quit cannabis too. And I actually already quit cannabis before that. I'm back to just a little bit now because it's actually really nice for spiritual reasons. It's no longer though like a crutch like it used to be in my older days. Now it's a connection and a shamanic experience. But still, if you need to switch to cannabis as you were using alcohol or harder drugs, go for it, because that's going to be way better for you than harder drugs or even alcohol. And then just keep shimmying. It's a shimmying game, and you will get there if you just take a better step, and a better step with love and honoring, and then working on that shadow. Give it outlets, let it out, because that's where this is all really coming from. You're pent up, you're regressed, and you're not living in truth, and that's not your fault. You were raised on lies, and your parents didn't know better, and the school systems, the teachers don't know better. Like this is, like I've said before, like 5 evil dudes brainwashed everybody. And so it's all about all of us deprogramming and upgrading.
Absolutely. And you want to know what? I want to touch on this kind of because you were saying, why is it always at nighttime that these cravings kick in? So I might have some kind of explanation for that. So, of course, for you guys who have watched me a little bit, you know how I talk about how symbolism is one of the biggest languages in our reality. In fact, I do think that it is the prime language of our reality. And spoken and written word is secondary, because when we look at symbolism and what it does is it's picked up on a higher level by our unconscious and our subconscious minds. All right. And, you can take 2 people from 2 different walks of life who don't speak the same language, and you can show them a common symbol and they will understand that symbol. But we look at the symbolism of Horus and Set. So, as a lot of people know, Horus was potentially an embodiment of Christ energy as well, especially his story. But, we talk about how the duel between Horus and Set, when the sun would rise, Horus would win that battle. But the war would still go on throughout the day, but Horus would be winning it. And then when the sun would start to set, that that the darkness would come through, the darker aspects of this existence. Hey Don, good to see you here, man. And the darker aspects of of our existence start to kind of come to fruition. So you talked about, why do the cravings come at night for this kind of stuff, and or potentially the urges? And I think a lot of it has to do with that archetype that exists within us, because when we see the sun and we're in the light of the day, most of the time we're in that light frequency, and we can still maintain that light frequency into the nighttime too. But because of that symbolism and it casting that shadow upon us, the sun starting to set, we can even look at when the evening starts to begin. A lot of these urges can potentially rise in us because of that symbolism of that fact. So that's why I think, a lot of that stuff starts to happen in the evenings, because, you look at a lot of people who are healthy, even like myself, like, when the evenings come along, the snacking urges start to come into play. And, a lot of us too, feel like we have dealt with potentially negative energy attacks in the evening as well, and along those lines. So that's why I think a lot of that stuff happens in the evenings, is because of that archetypal symbolism. within us. We see light, we feel light. When we see dark, we start to get that as well, out of that as well. That kind of like that little bit of darkness starts to kind of start to swirl around within us and maybe start to showcase itself. But that's, again, too, something we have to hold in our awareness, knowing that we could potentially be experiencing this due to that archetypal symbolism, of the light and the dark, and of course, I've talked about too, how to view your world through a symbolic lens. So if you're viewing your world through that symbolic lens, that when nighttime comes along, you should have that in your awareness, like, hey, this is when this stuff is potentially going to start surfacing in me, these urges, these cravings, and all of this stuff that I'm looking to kind of get rid of in my life and to move towards a more healthier way of being and a more healthier way of life. And so let's keep that in our awareness, guys. Also, what you were saying, Dyanna, too, about the badass mode and like trying to quit everything all at once. And one of the biggest things that I've learned to adopt, in my spiritual evolution, of course, people like Dyanna and I, we're like 200%, and we're like, let's push ourselves to the limit. Let's see how high we can go. And, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But you're going to have days, though. This is the human experience that we're in. Yes, we are divine beings, but I kind of throw the joke. We also have to treat ourselves like divine beings who got a head injury and have a little bit of slight amnesia, at the same time. It's all about giving yourself grace ultimately too. So that's kind of why I've adapted the same mentality that I have with working out, actually, with my spiritual evolution. And this could potentially benefit some of you out there too. Now, I've been, training a long time, and when you've been training a long time like me, you're gonna have good days and bad days. Like, you're gonna walk into the gym one day and you're gonna be feeling great. You're gonna have all of this energy. You're gonna be feeling amazing, and those are the days that you push yourself. And that you give yourself a little bit of that extra oomph. You try to push it out a little bit more. And, good for you on those days, but then also too, you're going to have days, not just in the gym, but in life where you don't feel that great, something could be going on. So those are the days that you take your baby steps. Those are the days that, you might have to retract a little bit. You might have to, maybe give yourself that little treat, whatever it may be in your life, to kind of help keep you going. So I having that same mentality, Don, I definitely want to answer that. I'll let Dyanna go first after I finish this. But having that same mentality in your spiritual evolution, and with the work that you're doing within yourself, whether it be your healing, whether it be your meditation, whether it be, living in your authenticity, any aspect of, embodying true Christ and being in alignment with your spiritual values, just make sure you gauge yourself. So like, as Dyanna was saying, like, let's say you're quitting hard drugs, and you're getting off that, maybe switching, and there's a lot of people who are in recovery that use cannabis too. That's another thing I definitely would bring up, is there's a lot of people in recovery who use cannabis to help wean themselves off of those harder drugs. And of course, we all know the benefits of psilocybin and other entheogenic plants as well, in helping with addiction. I mean, I credit me not drinking alcohol to DMT, and DMT was a huge player in me putting down alcohol, and not imbibing in it to the excessive state that I was during that time. So this can be beneficial for you as well, to help you overcome a lot of these different things that you're trying to relieve yourself of or to heal yourself from. But I just wanted to throw that in there. Let's answer Don's question here. So we have, do you think the physical body's tendency to react to the amount it receives of light affects our vulnerability to dark entities? So what I'm getting from that is, if we receive more light, does it affect our vulnerability to dark entities? I'm going to let you go first on that, Dyanna. Let's get your thoughts.
So from what I'm seeing here, the tendency to react to the amount of light, and then does that make, so are you saying like when we get too much light, literally from sun gazing or a meditation or just a download, an epiphany, there's so many things that can bring in a large, and let me know if I'm wrong and you can clarify. But when we receive these large wallops, and those are just the different way they can come into us, they can throw us into cognitive dissonance. I would say you are 100% shielded from entities during that period, from any new ones, as long as you stay in today's topic, which is being your own sovereign, discerning self, being in your own power, being the example, being your own truest self to the highest degree you already were. It's just, don't let yourself fall any further. Don't make any mind narratives about the cognitive dissonance that could be happening. Don't tell yourself you're not good enough. Don't any of that. Just allow it, because that light coming through your system is blowing away blocks. It's blowing away all kinds of like tangles and a million different ways I could say blocks, because there's a million different kinds. There's implants. There's all these different things, from subconscious programming to actually getting shot at us frequencies that are keeping us down, including the food we eat. So there's lots, and the water we drink. There's so many things for us to work through when these light comes into us, that especially when it first starts happening, and in this will be years, it will hurt pretty much. You'll mentally go weird. And like, if you know what cognitive dissonance mean, it says it all in that terminology, that it's going to give you a shake, and you're going to be weird, and you're going to feel sick, and you're going to maybe need to lay down. Fasting will help you through it better. Fasting is the best way to get through any kind of an upgrade or any real trauma that's happening. Fasting gives the body that extra energy to fight whatever's happening. But it's not like it's fighting the light, but it can help fight along to get rid of the blocks. It can help relax the system so the light's allowed in, because there's going to be things inside you that are resisting it. Like, you could spend years at this, but still have old implants or you know what I mean, trauma in your subconscious. Like, your subconscious, 95% of your existence, that's going to take perhaps a lifetime to cure. And so it's all just a working progress with that. But no, dark entities cannot get into you during just standard cognitive dissonance, because remember, any entity needs to be allowed, and there's lots of different ways where you give them permission to enter. So just make sure you're not giving any permissions, which means not throwing away any power in any way with anybody or anything. Whatever you're dealing with, even if you're giving up at it, you're giving up with power. You're quitting with power. You're eating your chips with power. Whatever you're doing, you're not going to be like, oh, I can't believe I have to do this. No, you're just going to be like, yeah, fuck yeah, I'm doing it. Yeah. And you're just going to go through whatever you got to go through, but in a power position, in a higher self power position, not an ego power position.
So it's only ketchup potato chips. If you're eating those, then you're giving away your power. No, I'm just kidding. But no, that was a fantastic answer, Dyanna. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. The other thing I'm gonna say too, Don's literally eating chips right now. Are they ketchup, Don? Or are they dill pickle?
He's Canadian.
He's Canadian, so it's got to be ketchup or dill.
That's my favorite. Are they Lay's? Oh my god, that's my favorite.
You did it. You know, you salt and vinegar haters over here. You're saying that it messes up your teeth, the roof of your mouth. No, it hurts your tongue. It hurts your tongue. All right, but no, my answer, yes, very much to what Dyanna was saying. Is it's the allowance, it's the acceptance. The one thing I want to add to what Dyanna said, though, is we have to have discernment as well with some of these energies that we're working with, because I have had it myself. There are going to be a lot of energies or entities that could present themselves as being beneficial, that can also be a trickster or have some kind of, I'll tell you, because, we say how, the darkness can sometimes masquerade as an angel of light. So one of my biggest things for, understanding, for dealing with entities, if any of them come into your stream, is look at how they interact with you as well. Are they buttering you up? Are they stroking your ego? Are they telling you you're doing a fantastic job even though you're not? Are they making you feel special to any kind of degree? So, this even has to do with energies, because we know accepting an energy of this aspect too can also be the acceptance of an entity, or an egregore itself. So that's just the other thing I would add to that, is just have a little bit of discernment too when you experience something in that cognitive dissonance, or something might come through as a lifeline, or it seems like a lifeline at that point, or, so just always have discernment with everything. Always give it a proper evaluation. No, I absolutely love your answer though, Dyanna. I think that really hits the point home. So one of our, not our last topic, but one of the last that I want to bring up too is loving thy neighbor. And for a lot of you that know me, that's something I live by. I honestly feel like, we should be treating ourselves as a family here in this conscious collective. I've said it ad nauseum, and I won't go too deep into it, as we're sitting here talking here at the ministry, but we are, guys, we're a family. All right, we have a soul bond here going on, and even if I don't know you personally, and I'm not acquainted with you on a personal level, we're all ultimately sharing this soul bond amongst each other, because we're all having this experience, we're all having this remembering of our true nature, true Christ, the conscious nature of this existence in ourselves. So ultimately this ties into loving thy neighbor, and whether your neighbor is in our conscious collective or not, or it's he's might be somebody that you still see as not aware, who has not cultivated the divine spark. We still have to showcase that love for them, that acceptance. And what does it truly mean to love thy neighbor? One thing Christ tried teaching us is that we are all a piece of the divine embodied here in this existence. Okay, so that's definitely something that we should hold in our awareness. Although we may look different in ways, have different viewpoints, different ways of living, etc., we ultimately must come to find love and acceptance for each piece of the divine that's embodied here. When you see another human, you see another you. And this is something that, I think we need to focus on here in this conversation. And underneath it all, that human is a piece of the divine, as you yourself are also a piece of the divine. So that in and of itself should form a foundational basis of love and acceptance. We really are not that different underneath it all. This is something we overlook consistently in our collective mentality. And we can see this play out on our world stage with the immense division that we see in our world currently at this time. We often allow our disagreements to take precedence over our commonalities. In my eyes, this is done purposefully through the conditioning of the matrix system our governments and media place on us. But we are all ultimately responsible as we allow this conditioning to encompass us and rule our thoughts and our behaviors. So, Dyanna, let's talk about loving thy neighbor, and actually putting this into practice, embodying this.
Yeah, well, it comes down to just pragmatism, right? Because we're all one. And all of humanity is connected to the same matrix, is the same monadic structure we are all a part of. And however that looks throughout the realms, it can look however it wants. At a certain layer, we are all one. So when Jesus told us this, it was literally giving us the all is mind, the all is one. Everybody is one. Something the Buddhists were big on telling everyone. Everything is one. And that doesn't mean get lost in Maya and just give up. But it means when you're dealing with anybody, pretend they're you. And if you are awakening in sovereign, I would hope that you're at a place where if you're mouthing off or you're being bad or you're stepping on toes, you would want that person, you want somebody else to tell you, and you'd want them to tell you
Absolutely.
nicely, but you'd want to be told, right? So you can go at this like, so there's no false light here where it means that you have to be great and nice to everybody regardless of what they do to you. No, you just learn to set boundaries in sovereign discernment in a balanced place that's coming from that Christ light, that's going to come with some light for them to plant seeds. Like whatever it is, how you state how they have to treat you, or how you want a certain situation to go, or what your truth is. And then you can even say your truth and know or be ready for them not to honor that, or them to honor it but not be able to live up to it. Like if you have certain relationships, like family can be very complicated, and you could say like, I need you
Absolutely.
to speak to me like this, and they could be like, well, I can't. And you at least said your truth, and then you have to take that next step. Does that mean that you don't see them anymore? Probably it should mean that. And in whatever the next step is, but you're still going at it with everybody, not that they're the enemy, because we need to learn the both boundaries, because we want to cultivate a strong and firm self. And you cannot be a strong and firm self if you let anybody betray you, or that's you betraying yourself. The letting, you betrayed you. And when that's a sin. That is the ultimate sin, is betraying yourself. So you learn to set boundaries, and just living sovereign and discerningly makes that easier. I used to be an extreme people pleaser, and now I'm not even a little, because I'm still very nice, because that's the thing. I am nice. I'm very heart-centered, but I don't betray myself anymore, because as a projector I can't afford it. Like I just can't. I don't have the energy for it. So it's in a weird way, it's like it's my way or the highway, but not in a selfish way, because we can switch roads if and when you're with a certain friend group and stuff, like there is, you can make negotiations, and you don't need to be rigid and never change your mind. I'm not saying that. You can still listen to what they're saying from their deepest truth, like they were you. Hear them out, because then that could change your truth, and in a good way, because we can still grow together. Everything can be brainwashing in a weird way. We're very flexible. So this is just going to be a process of growing and learning, but with love and light, like with that middle pillar path of discussing, because maybe you and Cindy could come to a different arrangement that's not the same that she wanted, nor the same that you wanted, but you both found a middle ground that you're going to deal with, because you both came at that from a middle pillar. Love thy neighbor, meaning we are all the same person. That's why we are all the same person. And everything you do creates a frequency that affects the world. So when we say like, be a nice person, it's not just like fluff. You being a good person should be a priority, but you don't betray yourself ever. And if you have to be firm, you be firm, but always from a place where it's like, that's a respectable thing, where you wouldn't be embarrassed if someone heard you. You wouldn't be embarrassed if someone saw. And I mean, even after you calm down, because I know what it's like to get all fired up and be like, oh, what I said was right. But give it a couple hours once, or give it a couple days. Once you calm down and you're embarrassed, you did the wrong thing. And because when you stand in Christ light, it actually might be harder at first. Then it actually might take you some effort, especially if you're new to it, to speak your truth, to stand your ground, to whatever it is in the situation. That might be, you might be like, if you're like me, like I'd be shaking, but then you feel great. Then afterwards you feel empowered. And that's how you know you did. Like if you feel the light come on, you know you're heading in the right zone. And this is something all of humanity really needs to work on, is how we deal with each other and think of each other. Because stop thinking of everybody as the enemy. Nobody is actually an enemy. They might have their own agendas, but it's not to get you personally. It's all for just their
Absolutely.
own reasons. And then that's where we just got to think sovereignty, discernment over and over and over again, because you need to retool the way you see absolutely everything.
I would completely agree with everything you just said. And of course, this is something I want to talk about, and you brought it up. Loving thy neighbor is not being a doormat. Absolutely. It's not being a doormat. And I actually have been, this has been circling a lot in the self-help circle. It's called being kind over nice. And when we look at the difference between kind and nice, for me, being kind is, of course, giving somebody the same respect that you would give yourself. Of course, if you're going to do something in a kind way for somebody, do it in an altruistic sense, do it without expecting anything in return. I think that's the different definition between nice and kind. Is if you're being nice, you're doing something with ulterior motives, or you're expecting something in return for being nice. So ultimately, yes, as leading on to what Dyanna said, is it's not being a doormat, loving thy neighbor. It's not just accepting anything that comes from people. Boundaries, of course, are going to be important in this. And now the biggest question I can ask everybody out there is, if you were messing up, and you weren't doing the right thing by yourself or others, would you put boundaries against yourself? Like, take a look into, the other person, step into the other person's shoes. This could be a loved one, a friend of yours or something, or even just a normal everyday person that you meet on the street. If that person isn't acting correctly or not doing right by themselves or other people, you can still have that love for them, but that you need to put up that boundary. Obviously, there's something going on with them that needs to be addressed, and they have something within themselves that they need to take care of. So yes, that of course, loving thy neighbor does not come without boundaries. It doesn't come without, protecting your energy. And, one of the biggest things I say too is sometimes you have to be a little selfish in order to keep being selfless, because ultimately we want to be in service to others. We want to be, and that's what true Christ wants us to do. It wants us to be in service to others, and to look at others as an extension of ourselves. So to me, that would be loving thy neighbor. Ultimately, is being in service to others and looking at others as extensions of ourselves. Of course, we would treat others with the same respect that we would give to ourselves. And also, too, we would treat others with those boundaries that we would also put forth on ourselves. So that's also taking that into the culmination of this topic of loving thy neighbor. Ultimately, what I think it is as well is, and one of the other thing I would say is view everybody as another you. Okay. And that's another way we can start putting this into practice. Is, let's say you encounter a situation with somebody, and one of the first things you should ask yourself is, how would I treat myself if I was doing something like this? And of course, like, we run into things all of the time. We can run into challenging situations in our subjective experience each day, and that to me is going to be the real thing that lays that foundation for you to act in a way that is of love, compassion, and understanding. So a good example is, let's say you're driving down the road and somebody has road rage. I know we talked about this story the other day, and they're acting crazy, and they pull up next to you, and they might brandish a weapon of some kind, or they might be yelling at you. So in that moment, you kind of think to yourself, you're like, okay, how would I treat myself in this situation if I was acting this way? I would not engage with that person. I would try to de-escalate the situation, and give them the respect of allowing them to voice their feelings without allowing it to come hurt me or to interfere in my life with what I'm doing. I just brought that up because I had a story about that that happened to me recently. But also as well too is, doing, we talk about doing unto others as you would have done unto you. Right. And, we talk about the golden rule when it comes to Christ a lot, and of course, if, that also comes into play when it comes to bad things, not just good things. So that's something we have to hold in our awareness when it comes to loving thy neighbor. Remember, the all is mine and we are of the all. You're dealing with another divine, subjective divine focal point, who is ultimately the same as you, because you're ultimately another divine subjective focal point as well of this all is mind. So ultimately you want to treat that with the same love and respect that you would treat yourself with. And that ultimately is what I feel loving thy neighbor is, including what Dyanna said, because that ultimately is going to turn the tides here. You know, as I said in the beginning, as we approach this topic, the division in this world has come to a very interesting point, and we're looking at our collective at this point in time, where all of our disagreements have taken precedence over our commonalities. And the way we can turn the tides with this is to, just like we've started talking about in this whole episode. This is actually, I'm going to say this has gone down as one of my favorite episodes, because a lot of these are my favorite topics to talk about. We have so we have leading by example, we have trusting the process, and loving thy neighbor. Ultimately, we could see these three kind of go hand in hand. They correlate with each other, you know, and they're synergistic of each other, and they complement each other. So by what we can ultimately do to turn the tides is to utilize that middle pillar, is to utilize that true Christ, and to utilize living by example, shining our light into this world with that authenticity, you know, trusting this process that we're undergoing. It's ultimately, it's a bumpy road, guys. You know, this is why I call the spiritual evolution, I call it the spiritual spiral. I've done away with the path, you know, because ultimately there's no end destination for this, as we've come to see. It continues to move forward. And why I call it the spiritual spiral is you will be brought back to certain instances. You will be tested. The divine will test you. You will be brought back to maybe similar scenarios. You might be brought back to similar reading material. You might be brought back to a similar person or experience in your life. And so understanding that as well is, you know, part of trusting the process, that, you know, sometimes you might have to revisit something in order to move a few steps forward. You know, you as you grow, you dawn a new perspective. You know, as we evolve, our perspective shifts, our perspective changes. So that's why you might be brought back to that book, that situation, that person, or whatever it might be, because now that you have this new perspective, okay, you can learn more, and that might be exactly what you need to break free from that karmatic cycle, you know, is to pass that test, to look at that situation differently, you know what I mean, to have a different outcome from that situation, you know. So that's where trusting the process really comes into play. And of course, loving thy neighbor, you know, and seeing everybody as another you, you know, where we all ultimately, if we look at our commonalities, we all ultimately want the same things in life, do we not? You know, we want a free life, we want a joyful, abundant life, you know, we want a loving life, we want a happy life, okay, you know, we want the ability to be sovereign, discerning beings, and to make our own choices and what's best for us in our evolution, not just here in this temporary human existence, but also the spiritual aspect of it all. So ultimately, guys, I really enjoy talking about these topics, because this is embodying Christ. Okay, this is embodying what Christ told us. This isn't worshiping. This isn't just looking at. This is truly taking what Christ said and putting it into action. And that is ultimately what Christ wanted for us. Christ, what was it say? What was the let me look up this quote real quick. And you know, this is actually, I believe, Christ, if you drink from my mouth. So this is actually a really good quote that I like. So if Christ, if you drink from my mouth, comes from the Gospel of Thomas, saying 108, it means that if someone drinks from Jesus's mouth, receives his teachings, they will become like him, and hidden things will be revealed to them. This is a symbolic way of
That was
saying,
in the song we opened with. That was in the song.
exactly.
That comes through the mouth. That's a phrase in the song.
I know. That's why I think it was in my mind still. But you know, and this is a symbolic way of saying that through faith and understanding of Jesus's teachings, a person can become transformed into a Christ-like person. So that's exactly the whole premise of this, guys. These three topics are embodying the teachings, and that's why I absolutely love talking about them today. But Dyanna, do you have anything you want to say about this before we move into our topic? Because I did want to bring up spirituality and mental illness for just a little bit. I know you guys were talking about that on the panel yesterday, but let's see. Do you have any final thoughts about these three topics that we were talking about today?
Yeah, just a little exercise to live through because it'll blow your mind, and don't spend too much time there because it can actually be a horrible space. I spent a lot of time trying to get on board with, but it'll just have to wait till it's time. But when we say the all is the all, it means you are literally everyone. It means you're lit, and there's no such thing as time and space. Guess what that means? It means you're the kids getting tortured right now. It means you're you. It means you're me and him and everybody. You will live every one of those lives, every single one, because that's what there's one consciousness throughout all of existence, the all is mind. That one consciousness that filters through all these different dimensional streams that eventually come through and print us as an individual. But as its totality, that is one consciousness filtering through to do a million different things. There's said to only be one, the anthropic principle, there's said to only be one tiny little God particle, smaller than anything you could ever imagine, that is every single thing, making up every atom everywhere. And you're going to be every person, you're going to be everything at any point in time. So that love thy neighbor and do unto others as you would do to yourself is so deeply true because it is all you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, exactly, guys. This is what embodying the teachings means. Okay, exactly these three topics, and putting them into practice. Okay, and we're all healers in our own right. Healing doesn't just have to be healing the blind or anything along those lines. We're all ultimately healers, man. We've all ultimately healed and touched somebody here, and ultimately through embodying these principles and the teachings of true Christ, you yourself will recognize that healer within you as well, and understand that we all have the capacity to be like Christ. So that's just something else I wanted to add in there. So like a little bonus topic, spirituality and mental illness. This is something I've talked about on my show before. I know Dyanna has talked about on her show, and I know it was talked on the spiritual panel a little bit yesterday as well. One of the biggest things I want to bring to the table in the discussion of this is thank you, Don. Appreciate it much. And is a lot of us, let's talk about neurodivergency for a second. Let's talk about, people on the spectrum. We have neurodivergency, people on the spectrum, and we have schizophrenia as well. And one of my big beliefs is a lot of the things that we begin to label as mental illnesses, such as, neurodivergency, being on the spectrum, or schizophrenia, are actually spiritual states of consciousness that we have yet to begin to understand. And if you've noticed, we see a lot of the medical industry kind of dismissing a lot of research of these individuals, and dismissing the research moves right into treatment and starting to try to treat people, and as opposed to researching this further. Also, too, on our spiritual evolution, we get downloads, especially downloads that shatter our perspective of what we knew as truth yesterday. And it can fragment us. It can almost make us feel like we're experiencing some kind of mental illness. So I want to address these two topics. Dyanna, if you don't mind going first and diving into spirituality and mental illness, the commonalities, and how a lot of these states, or a lot of these different disorders that are called disorders, could actually potentially be exactly, Don, a different intellectual frequency. And I even say, we look at ADHD, because I'm diagnosed with adult ADHD, just saying that's what it is. But I call it attention dialed into a higher dimension. And that's my new term for it. But Dyanna, let's hear your thoughts on this topic. Up your mic.
So to start it off, my grandmother that I talked about all the time that had schizophrenia, full blown, like, voices and locked up and all the things, try to kill people. But she was a wonderful person. But like when she was stabilized, but at her root, she was autistic. You could tell she was like, before they started overly poisoning autistic people, and then they end up completely nonverbal. But she was like that kind of, that weird edge autistic. And I love to just consider it now divergent, because, instead of neurodivergent, we are just divergence, because it's exactly that. We were here to break out of the matrix. We're potentially souls that just literally don't fit into the matrix, even if we wanted to. And then it creates like a dissonance in us and in those around us, because we don't fit the narrative. But there's more and more and more of us coming online. Like, I'm sure my grandma was one of the only ones, and it probably led to her having to go schizophrenic, because like she's in a world where she didn't fit. Like, her stories when she was young are so sad. You could tell they're the kind of things that would only like upset someone that was autistic that much. It's something a normal person would just shrug or laugh off, but she would be like, it would haunt her for her entire life. And that's okay. But you could see, right? Like, we're put into this, and even all of us, how we all talk about how we have such dark pasts. That's why, because we were divergents, and because we came into a world we didn't fit into. We were told we were wrong. We were told we were stupid. We were told we were lazy. We were told we were bad, and all these things. And they just built and built and built. And it puts us into like a mental illness space, because all mental illness really is dissonance. It all comes down to dissonance. It's blocking yourself too much and getting into disharmony, where it's like your thoughts are now firing not in synchronicity, like not in any kind of a coherent pattern. You're blocking your ability to process information. You're blocking your natural flow, right? And this starts simply from just being a divergent that was meant to be like a starseed, that kind of thing. But so many things happen along the path. And then it's said that we put ourselves into bad homes, on purpose. I yeah. And we wanted this to strengthen our souls, allegedly, but whether or not we chose to do this on purpose, it has happened. But the answers are here, and the medical industry just wanted to pill us up and shut us up, because they didn't want any of this. It's probably why they upped the vaccine amount and now knocked I'm lucky I didn't give him that vaccine. This is how serious it is. Like, he might have died if I did, because he's already so top level. Because that's what I've seen it happen over and over and over again, where like they're now calling like physically disabled people autistic. It's like, that has nothing to do with it. That's a vaccine injury. But that's besides the point. It's just showing how they're upping the I don't want to use the word war, but I can't think of another one, the warfare against us, where like they're trying to get us to stop. So we aren't mentally ill. There's so many things happening. Like, they can put frequencies on us to make what we see as mental illness happen. And then plus upbringing, plus society rejecting us, plus like you add in all these layers of disharmonious factors. And yes, it's going to look like mental illness. And then if you take it and just look at it as mental sickness, yes, with no like saying like no taking away of the humanity, as the term is meant to do. You were just as much a human, and you could just as much heal. The only person that would actually be a problem, although I always believe everyone could be saved, would be like a sociopath, like the ones that where they're shut off from their humanity and probably not connected to a soul and probably embodied by an entity. That's the only ones that should potentially be like locked up. Everybody else should just be going to counseling of a therapeutic and spiritual nature. They should be working on themselves, again, cultivating sovereign discernment, because setting boundaries and all the topics of today actually fall right into curing your own mental illness. Because if you work on yourself and getting yourself to a higher position, get out of victim mentality, become your own spiritual warrior, you'll find that because I mean, any of my mental illness problems, which were not, I took myself to the doctor. I was never that bad. Like, I was locked up or anything, like what happened to my poor grandma. But I brought myself to the doctor because I was just living in such a pace of, and that's where a lot of us found ourselves, that we were just living in such a place of pain that we just didn't want to go on anymore. And we needed some form of relief, and income, substance abuses, and all these different variables that happen to people like that because they just want the pain to stop. But the truth is that you just need to become your own advocate, your own caregiver, your own savior, and connect to that Christ conscious energy, that golden stream of middle pillar life that is naturally going to help you balance and go through all these steps. That energy is there to empower you, but you're still going to be the one that has to stop drinking, stop doing drugs, stop blaming other people, and then just step by step by step. And the mental illness takes care of itself, whatever it is. We were talking yesterday, there's multiple different diagnoses that we all have. Learning about it helps, because then you can learn certain triggers, like things like they're each illness, like borderline personality, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, like they all have their own, manic depression, they all have their own like categories, and you can read about it and then but try to unpack it, try to unbox it. Don't take that as a permanent label. Just take that as a kind of a list of what you have to work with, allow, and eventually you won't. And masking can cause these problems, because if you're a divergent, you're probably used and learn to automatically mask. Stop masking, because just be weird. If they think you're weird, oh well, stop masking, because it is what it is. And masking your true self is going to cause a lot of symptoms in itself. So it's a big process, but you can get yourself out of it, because mental sickness, all you need to do is heal, and that will get better on its own. There is no mental illness that's permanent. Even schizophrenia with voices in your head, we talked about that yesterday. If you have to make peace with the guy in your head, then make peace with the guy in your head. Whatever the situation is, you are made and put here to become into harmonious balance. And that's just the way it is.
Absolutely. And I agree with everything you just said. We look at, let's take a look at the current paradigm here. We see this healthcare system, in the guidelines of both physical and mental health, and it casts a lot of spells, does it not? And that's one thing I've been diving into in my show, is the fact that this healthcare industry is also very dark and wants to snuff out a lot of the spiritual nature of this reality. So this is something that we also kind of need to take into account when we're dealing with stuff like this. And don't allow yourself to be medically hexed. Number one is also as well, because remember, guys, our consciousness creates our reality. We have the ability to either heal ourselves or harm ourselves. And the number one thing I think a lot of us who are divergent, we have to understand is that this healthcare system, as of this time, is kind of filled with darkness. It's not filled with the openness to individuals like us who are in these different streams of consciousness, who are in these different frequencies and this different way of being than your average person and that your standard person. So that's something too, don't allow yourself to be medically hexed by these diagnoses. Do not think that that there's something wrong with you, because ultimately you're here to break the mold. You're here to break the paradigm, as Dyanna was saying, and you are here to shift it with your being. So the number one thing I would say to a lot of people, a lot of us who are spiritual and who are on evolution get diagnosed with something, throughout our lives. And of course, like, take what I just said about this healthcare system. Take what I said, this healthcare system is of the matrix reality itself. It's going to tell you that there's something wrong with you, that you're ill, and that you need to be on this medication or whatever it is for the rest of your life because of this. And you're going to adopt that mentality into your being, into your consciousness, and you're going to make yourself even worse. So the number one thing I would say is gain an understanding and awareness about yourself, that you are in a different frequency. You're in a different state of consciousness than a lot of the people around you. Okay, so that would definitely be my first, and one thing I want to bring into play just for a conversation point. So there is a theory that's going around too. And I know Sam's in the audience too. I'd love her to chime in with this too. There's a lot of people in the spiritual community who think or have the theory that sociopaths and psychopaths don't experience karma the way that we do. And that's something maybe we can talk about towards the end of this as well. But nonetheless, guys, yes, you're living in a system right now that is trying to denounce anything that is spiritual. You're living in a system that wants you to plug into it, and whether it be through your diagnosis, whether it be through the medication that they're trying to give you, understand that you came here with a gift. Understand that you can harness this gift and you can use it to not only master yourself and gain an understanding of yourself and the being that you are, but to also utilize and help shift this collective reality that we're experiencing too. So that's what I want to add in there about that, and of course, like, you even look at things like pareidolia, right? They try to say, like, anybody that recognizes patterns, that's some kind of mental illness now. Like, they're trying to, of course, a lot of us are really awesome at recognizing patterns, aren't we? We've seen these patterns emerge, whether it be through our spiritual evolution, for me, the as above, so below, things like that, or we see the patterns of the world stage and the parasite class, and the things they do. And it's kind of funny how they're trying to now say that recognizing patterns is a form of mental illness. So that should be an example to you right there, that this system, if you're not doing what the system wants you to do, or you're not behaving or thinking in the way that the system wants you to behave, or you're not going along with the narrative that the system wants you to believe, they're going to do everything to discredit you, and they're going to do everything they can to label you as mentally ill. So that's also something that we need to keep in our consideration as well. But I want to just talk about that for a sec, because it's interesting. You look at sociopaths and you look at psychopaths, right? And you see they have no regard for human emotion, no empathy, no anything like that. I'm going to ask and turn it over to you, Dyanna. Do you think that they would potentially experience karma differently than us due to that awareness?
Yeah, they're definitely going to experience it differently, at least in this incarnation. So they're going to get it regardless because of the way the soul works, but they might end up saving it for another. I don't think they'll fully save it. My intuition is saying no, but it's going to present differently. They usually get got in a dramatic way in the end because it probably like creates a large mass that just wham and gets them. But because the all is mind, and because they enjoy what they're doing, that's why they're sociopaths. That's why they're the greatest danger. That's why you need to be aware that a lot of our leaders are them. The new pope, most of the popes probably, they're all sociopaths. So this is where we need to be aware and stop putting people like that in power. But besides that, these people get away with it, not because we're weak and small and they're big and huge, but because they are insane. They are the ones that are actually insane, but because the all is mind, they take that power, and because they love what they do, and even though it's malevolently evil, the human's actually not meant for that. We actually are meant to be good. So if you see a truly evil human, they're a sociopath. That they are diseased, and maybe their soul wanted that. No, I don't think so. My intuition says no. That they've gotten twisted somehow. Some entity has taken over them. Even if it's a reptile being, it would have to do something to the human for that to be allowed. But the reason they don't experience karma like us is because they're happy about what they do. Where the average Joe that is sinning and doing wrong things, they feel bad, whether or not they know it. Because there's a lot of sheeple that kind of mask and blanket over what it's fine, I'm cool, don't you know? Like they have all their excuses, and it's lame, and it's like we've heard it before. And even your base level narcissists, like they're just like, yeah. They're usually in a poor me narrative because they are getting their karma, because the all is mind and you can't escape the self and what you've done. But if you're a true sociopath, and you do, but they're not going to be they're not free forever. It just can present that way. It's going to present differently. That's really what it is. They're presenting differently to how that's going to play out, different than the regular humanity. Because I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I can't think of anyone else that's actually insane besides a sociopath. They're the only ones that are actually, because they're living outside of reality to such a dangerous degree. There's lots of people that do it to little points. There's lots of people that do it in like a bunch of different lame life stuff, but them and the way they live and the way they hurt people to such a large degree, that is, yeah, that's true insanity, and that's why their karma doesn't look the same. But everybody is subject to the same law. Nobody escapes the law. They just might look like it for a while.
Absolutely. And I think you summed it up nicely. And we see that current trend with a lot of we see them they do indeed get some kind of karma because I've noticed this and especially in our collective, and when you have somebody who, let's say, gets away with murder, and you know that they did it, you absolutely know that they were involved in it to some degree, but they end up getting away with it due to whatever reason. Have you ever noticed that it always seems very shortly after they succumb to some kind of really bad illness? It's like it almost seems like it's what happens. I remember looking at something. I was about 5 years ago. This guy, he had ended up killing 2 women, and he got away with it in court. He ended up, getting off scot-free. But within the year, he died from stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Within the year. So yes, they do. They do get their karma. There you go, Sam. I was waiting for you. It's all a part of the individual experience that he said needs to have. How sociopaths, etc., experience cause and effect is different. Exactly, 100%. Hitting the nail on the head. But no, it is. And that's just a trend that I've seen with a lot of sociopaths and psychopaths is they ultimately get taken out by some kind of very bad illness. It's like almost like the all is mind and the infinite love of the all of mind is coming in and is like, okay, look, like this incarnation, we've got to bring this back and maybe utilize this for something else in this existence. But nonetheless, guys, this was an amazing time today. I think we covered a lot of bases. And, I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to sit down with us here at Church of True Christ and to break down loving thy neighbor, leading by example, and trusting in the process. Know that anybody who's listening can reach out to me or Dyanna here on X or wherever else. I am at BGCast with 3 underscores between the BG and the cast, and she is at Transcending 77. So 7. Yep. There's 4 7s or 3. I thought there was only 3. There's 3. Yep. At Transcending with 3 7s. So feel free to reach out to us, guys, about any questions or any comments. And we will be back next Sunday doing this again. And we will be bringing to the table some more great topics to talk about as well. I don't know, Dyanna, maybe we could talk about Swedenborgianism a little bit. Let's talk about resurrectionist Christianity a little bit more. I think, one of the biggest things I want to let everybody know is we're not the first ones to have tried to do this.
We're just the first ones that aren't going to get killed for it. Like the whole generation, not us specifically, but they're not allowed. They're not allowed anyways, killing us.
No, they're not allowed. They're not allowed to kill us anymore, for sure. So, I mean, they can try to discredit us all they want, and they can try to throw whatever they can. But as you guys know, nothing stands a chance against the light of true Christ. It will always permeate. It will always showcase itself, and it will always embody itself here to restore the balance here in this dangerous, irresistible pastime we call the human experience. Alrighty, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Have yourselves a very happy Mother's Day and a very happy Sunday. Go outside, enjoy the fresh air, and of course, like I always say, stay safe, stay free, and most importantly, stay sovereign. Everybody have a happy Sunday. Anything you want to add, Dyanna, before we head off?
No, just happy Mother's Day to all the moms, and we'll see you next time.
See you guys. Have a good one.